Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second night of the Overcome Your Imposter workshop, where today we are going to start diving into the mind. I talked a little bit yesterday about why it's so important to start here in the mind. And just to recap, everything here starts in the mind. Everything we say, everything we think, everything we say, everything we do starts with where we think, right? Um, and I want specifically to kind of dial us in here to talk about how imposter syndrome affects women who are working or high achieving, because this really is the core component of how our imposter syndrome tends to affect us in terms of our actions and behaviors and how we move forward towards success, right? So I was thinking a lot about this, and I realized that for me personally, my imposter syndrome started when I was much, much younger. I have a younger brother, and I also played sports when I was growing up. And so from when I was a kid, I was noticing how differently boys were treated compared to girls were treated when it came to their performance, what they were learning, how they were encouraged. My great grandmother was a bit of a socialite, and I think it kind of trickled down into my grandmother, who was always kind of like, be ladylike, don't yell, don't run. Being aggressive or abrasive is so not something a lady should be doing, right? Um, and I really internalized that. And even though I was such a precocious child, I did have a lot of opinions and I was very loud. And I did have these things that I wanted to go after. If I decided I wanted to do something, even from a young age, I did it. I was a writer and an artist, and I just was like, this is what I really like to do, and I'm going to freaking do it, right? But when I think back on things too, I of course like to think of myself. I mean, now I'm a communication expert. I specialize in confidence creation, happiness maintenance. And I like to think in my head, like, oh, I've always been this way. But in actuality, I haven't. And I was thinking back today, last week when I was putting this all together. And one of the biggest things that struck me was when I was in high school, I hated missing school. I hated not being present or feeling like I was going to miss something that would make me smarter or that would help me pass my test or that would, help me write a better paper. I just hated being absent for school. And for 2.5 years, half of my sophomore year, my junior year, and my senior year, I took AP classes. And AP classes are not easy. They're college courses that kids take when they're in high school, right? I did it for 2.5 years, and I never took a single AP test. And I was thinking back about this, and I don't know how this came into my head, but I was just trying to think about things that I wasn't necessarily very confident about, because I was confident about so much. And why didn't I take my AP test? And then I realized I was really scared of not passing them. And the thought of not passing my AP test was so crippling that I didn't take them. And for those of you who don't know what AP tests are, they're college courses that you can take in high school. And if you take the test at the end of the course, it means you don't have to take that class in college. It's basically like a credit that some schools sign off on, and it counts, right? So I did 2.5 years worth of AP classes and never took an AP test. And then therefore I had to take all those classes again. And of course, when I was there, I still had to take tests. I still had to write the papers. But for some reason, when I was in high school, it was a really challenging thing for me to think about, right? So I want you to know, we talked about the definition of imposter syndrome and how it's defined as affecting accomplished people, right? It's not something that just like wanders into someone who's not really doing anything. There's no reason for anybody to believe that they are an imposter if they're not doing much, right? But for those people that are doing a lot, that's where it really comes in. And so I want, as we begin to dive into this, you also give yourself some grace and understanding that this is something that is meant to affect people who are doing shit, right? It's not like you are or you aren't. Like you definitely are. And so be gentle with yourself as you make these acknowledgments, as you understand. I know when I first started doing this work, it took me so long to get to the point where I was actually healing myself, because I kept saying, I don't say mean things to myself. Like I would never say a mean thing to myself, or I would say something like, oh, I don't believe that. And like, of course I did. That's why it's in my head. That's why it's there. So, being honest with yourself, giving yourself some grace, understanding that this is a process that successful people go through. And the fact that you're here doing the work to move past it emotionally and begin healing these things so that you can reach your next success is something to be applauded. As women who are doing stuff, I think that we have similar traits, right? Like, excuse me, we do set goals, and when we set our goals we keep going until we figure out how to get to our goals. Sometimes it's like this, and sometimes it's like this, but we tend to make a goal and focus on it, and sometimes we don't reach our goals. Sometimes our goals tend to shift on their own, and that's fine, right? But we do tend to be forward thinking in goal setting, strong minded, focused, smart, wanting to learn more, wanting to be a part of a group that is constantly learning, progressing with innovation, those types of things, right? So when we think about men and women, I'm going to talk about this just for a quick second here. Men and women are taught to embrace confidence and strength very differently from a young age, right? So men don't tend to think about things, and this is obviously big generalizations, but as a society for men and women, our society of men and women, they tend to be encouraged to take risks and to be confident and to not second guess themselves, to just like go for it, right? Whereas we have been taught a bit of a softer approach to life, right? To be soft spoken, to think about what we're saying before we say it because we don't want men to laugh at us. And I often think back to Mad Men. I used to watch Mad Men, and I used to watch how the men in the 50s, which is not that long ago, would talk to the women in their work field, work area, or how the women would have to. Or would encourage each other to behave a certain way so as not to come off a certain way or to upset someone, or maybe they want to get ahead so they have to do certain things, right? Like men, they didn't have to do that. They just did whatever they were doing. And women had so many more steps that they had to follow to get to where they wanted to be. So now, of course, we're living in an age where not all of that applies. A lot of it still does. It looks different, but it still has a quack like a duck, right? So understanding that we have extra steps as women in a field that is also populated by men that we have to do to get to where we want to be. And a lot of the times we internalize what those steps are. We make them personal, and that's one of the things that kind of tends to eat away at our mental health, right? But because we're strong minded, and because we're strong willed, and because we're determined, we go through it. And what I have found with my personal clients, and something that I've experienced in my years of owning businesses as well, is that when I have those moments where I'm just not quite sure, or I'm doubtful, or I have fear, I just kind of like stuff it down and I keep going, right? And that does work for a period of time. But the problem with that is that just by stuffing it down or putting it in a corner or pretending like it doesn't exist doesn't make it go away. And that is one of the reasons why I created this workshop, is to give sustainable tools in working through it so that it's less of a burden. It doesn't continue to pop up and have the same effect on you as if you didn't do this work, right? Secondly, in all of this, one thing I've really noticed is because we're so strong willed, and because we're so determined, and because we just get it done, people don't expect that we have struggles or hardships when it comes to dealing with this kind of stuff, right? So I have, like I said, I have a younger brother, and he is probably the exact, my mom, she says we're the exact opposite, and I believe that we are. But she said, even from birth, we have been the exact opposite. I'm very loud. I'm very much an extrovert. I really have a ton of passions, a ton of hobbies. I want to do everything. I want to meet every person. I want to visit every place in the world. I have like all the things, right? My brother's the opposite. He's like very content with, having one job, or like doing one thing at a time. He's very quiet. My mom said when he was a kid, he was like a little Buddha. He's very centered. Um, doesn't really have a lot of like fiery passion about a lot of different things the way that I do. And when I became an adult, and we were talking about my brother and the difference between him moving out, me moving out, all these things, she said, I never worried about you. I never worried about you because I just knew that you would take care of it. I knew that whatever you needed, you would find it. I knew that whatever you wanted to do, you'd figure out how to get there. I just knew that you would be okay. So I never really felt like I had to do the extra things with you because I just knew you would do them for yourself. And this is something that I think I want to encourage all of you as amazingly strong, awesome women to go check on your girlfriends, because this is something that I think eats away at us more than we admit it. Is that people don't expect us to like need help, and they don't expect us to struggle as much because we're like, right? But we do. And then when we do, we don't know where to go. We don't know who to turn to. We don't know like what's the next step in making sure that our mental health is on the up and up and not spiraling down, right? So what we tend to do is we stuff it, or we hide it, or we cover it up. We start Netflix binging, we're ordering food, we're online shopping, we're doing all of these other things that tend to impact us differently than accepting that we're feeling overwhelmed or sad, or we have these negative thoughts in our head and we don't know how to get over them, right? So we're going through it now, and it's really important to me. One of the reasons that I created the community is so that people have, you women have a place to go when these things start to rear their head, because they do come up. We tend to ignore them, or we tend to put them in an outlet that is unhealthy. But what would happen if you had a community of people who you could express this to, and they could be like, yep, been there, seen it, done it, absolutely, we're here for you, how can we help? It's amazing, right? So that's what that group is for, that space. And it really is to make sure that as you're struggling, you have support. So I wanted to take a minute here to kind of talk about, in the research that I've done with the clients that I've worked with, how they are being affected by their imposter syndrome, the words that they say, the things that end up coming up, how they really hear them in their head, right? So I'm just going to take a minute to pull this up here. So these are the four, obviously I talked to a lot of different people. And so what we were talking about and going through, as I kind of like melded it all together into these four examples. And I'm sure that you guys have heard or seen these, maybe not necessarily in your own head, but definitely like in articles that you have read or things of that nature. So I'm just going to take a minute to kind of walk through them. And I want you to tell me if like any of them sound familiar to you, right? Because these are the four ones, they're the ones that are so common that I heard so often. And I put them in here as you would hear them in your head. So the first one is, I was able to leave my job and start my own design company, but now imposter syndrome stops me from branching out to new clients. I think they are too big for me. Right? I got promoted to a position I've wanted for over a year, but now that I'm here, I feel like I can't do my job and I won't meet expectations. Every time I hit one of my goals, I get the feeling I didn't really earn everything I have achieved. I decided I wanted to increase my prices and then talk myself out of it. I kept hearing in my head, who do you think you are charging people this much for your coaching? And these are, basically voices. I like to call them the imposters in your head that are floating around, that are trying to tell you not to move forward, that are instilling in you fear and doubt, that really sounds like a voice. It sounds like a person, right? Right now, what it is the sound of your voice, right? So I want you to begin the process of thinking about it as somebody's voice other than your own. This is something that I started 3 years ago with my health and fitness clients, that when they get tired or when they get like so over their meal plan, or they feel like they don't want to get up and do the workout, and they're just like, no, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. I was like, you look at that voice in your head and you say, no, Diane, I'm getting out of bed right now, right? You can take that voice, you can give it a name, you can give it its own name and its own character. I also feel like you can give it like another, like I gave it a character's name. We're going to talk a little bit about the four specific imposters tomorrow, but I call one of them the Jon Snow. And every time in my head, I have the thought where like, I don't know enough to do whatever it is I'm doing, even though I know that I do. I obviously do. I have over 15 years of experience in this field, working with women, working with confidence communication. Whenever I get that voice, it's just like, you don't know shit. I go, no, 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 you don't know shit, Jon Snow. And I just leave it there, right? So give it a character name, give it its own name, whatever you feel like you can actually separate yourself from this imposter thought and be able to look at it through the lens of your eyes and say through your mouth, no, right? And as you begin to journal about what your voices sound like, they may be saying different things to you, right? A lot of the times I hear like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I can't pull off that outfit. I'm never gonna have like a successful launch. I'm always gonna be working for someone else. I'm miserable. I'm always gonna be miserable. I'm not gonna be able to find love. Nobody wants to date me. Blah 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 blah. You know, all of these imposters in our head. They say all different kinds of things. And I want you to begin focusing on what they say about you and your business, or whatever your next big goal is, right? Whatever it is, you're at A, whatever you want your B to be, whether it's financial freedom, starting your own business, getting a promotion, whatever it is, what are the voices in between your A and B saying to you? And then be able to acknowledge them without embracing them, right? Acknowledge them. Jon Snow, no thank you, without embracing them, okay? So as we start to get into this, I really want to emphasize the importance of talking about this, because as we begin to push and stuff down, it can begin to come back up in very different ways. And we're going to talk a lot about impact tomorrow, but I just want to say, like, we don't talk about it enough. I know that imposter syndrome has been something that's more acceptable and popular to talk about now. I was doing a little bit of research for this workshop, and I was like, oh, imposter syndrome is everywhere, right? There's tons of articles. I'm sure that your favorite online influence person, whatever, if you search their blog or their website, somewhere they talk about imposter syndrome. And one of the reasons why it is everywhere now is because it's been so affecting to us, right? It has affected us, especially as women. It is one of those things that like really hits home. And a lot of us, especially in business, are told that like leave our emotions at the door. We're not supposed to be feeling so much. This is a business. We're talking about strategy. We're talking about tactical, ways that we can achieve our goals, X, Y, and Z, right? No room for emotion. But these are real things that we are affected by. And by ignoring it, we're only making it worse. So I think that there is a constructive way to address imposter syndrome that leaves us feeling like we have been heard, that we are not crippled, that we can acknowledge that we're feeling something, but not let it keep us from doing a great job, right? So I talk a little bit about this in your work journal, why we don't talk about it and why we need to be talking about it. And then giving you the space to write your own imposter thoughts there, right? And when you don't talk about your imposter thoughts, who benefits from that, right? Anybody that you're in competition with at work, maybe they're eyeballing the same position as you, the same promotion, they're not affected by it. You're crippled by it, and they benefit from that, right? And what happens when you're sitting at your desk miserable at work, but you still keep clocking in every single day? You're miserable, but someone else is reaping the benefits of you being miserable at your desk because they have work and labor, right? So like think about the impact that really comes with this, right? They benefit from you being crippled. But who benefits if you begin to work through this and work over it and get over it, right? You do. You benefit from doing this work. You get to say what you want, when you want, how you want it, and not to let your emotions, your self-doubt, your fear, your imposters in your head drive the van. And so as we end here today, I just want, it's like it all begins and ends with you. And I know that kind of sounds cheesy. No, it really sounds cheesy, but it really does. It begins with you. It began with you in your head. Whatever your thoughts are, those are your thoughts. Begin to break them up and realize where they came from. Who told you that? Why are you thinking those things? And this is something that I learned a long time ago, and I've implemented in all of my coaching and my teaching. I talk to myself the way that I would talk to any one of my clients, right? Like of course I get down on myself. Of course I have fear and doubt and all these things, right? When those thoughts start coming up, I go, okay. And I turn into Amber Rose, my own best friend. And I say, what would I say to my best friend if she called me right now and she was like, that art piece, like I just posted up one of my big henna pieces, right? And I was like, oh, I can see all the spots where it doesn't look good. And I was like, what would I say to one of my other henna artist friends if she called me and she was like, I just posted this piece on social media and I can see all the places where it sucks. And now I'm having anxiety. I want to take it down. I don't want people to think that I'm a bad artist because this one piece. I wouldn't be like, yeah, that is a piece of shit. You should probably take it down, right? Like I wouldn't say that to her. So why am I saying it to myself? Why am I beating myself into this, right? Talk to myself like my best friend. Yeah, it does have some imperfections, but that's a part of being an artist, and that's the truth of where you are with your skills right now. And like that's okay. Post something up better next week. Done and done, right? So understanding that it all starts with you. You have the power to flip this script. You have the power to make the changes that you're looking for. Who benefits from you getting over this? You do. And if you don't do it, who benefits? Everybody else, right? So taking the time to do this work step by step always begins in the mind, but really means that you in the end will benefit from being able to stop your imposters from driving the van and overrunning your thoughts, therefore impacting your actions. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with that tonight and give you some time to write down your own imposter thoughts. We're going to use the 4 examples that I gave today, those quotes, through the next 2 days as we go into the meaning and the movement. But I want you to have your own already written out so that when we get to those parts in the process, you can do the process with your own thoughts, okay? Thank you so much for joining me this evening. If you have any questions at all, of course, you can email me, theconfidencecolumn@gmail.com, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a good night.